everybody, it's Paige Evans, and I have a new process video to share with you today featuring the alphabet stamp set from my new pick-me-up collection with Pink Paisley. So I knew that I wanted to feature the stamps in a fun way, and I didn't have an exact design in mind when I first started, so I played around with the placement of photos first. Thought maybe doing a grid, I thought about maybe doing only on the upper half, and that's where I decided to go at first. So I wanted to do my stamping all along stitched lines, so I used my sewing machine and stitched wavy lines. I didn't want them to be straight, I wanted to give them some whimsy, just have them be a little bit, you know, not perfect, because I didn't want to do straight lines, I kind of just wanted them to be all over the place. And then I went through my ink stash and I pulled out all the colors of ink that I could find that matched Pick Me Up, and I used that dark floral paper that you saw at the beginning as my color reference, and I'm using a lot of colors from Altenew and Studio Calico. And then basically I'm just gonna start stamping. I am using Jane's favorites. So every year on her birthday, I ask her the same questions and I post them on my blog. So I basically just pulled all of these questions and answers straight from my blog. And I'm stamping one letter at a time, which does take some time. But that's okay. I find it relaxing and therapeutic, and I put a favorite show on in the background and stamp away. And I sped things up a little bit by opening up all of the inks. I was afraid they would dry out, but they didn't, so that's good. So I opened up all of the inks, and then I was able to stamp a little bit faster. And then in between the questions and answers, I left a little gap because I wanted to add some kind of embellishment in the gaps. At this point, I decided I wanted to do stamping across the entire background instead of just on the upper quadrant or the upper 2/3 or so. So I stitched a few more wavy lines and then trimmed off the excess threads a little bit. At first I thought I was going to use 2 photos, maybe even 3, and spread them apart, but I wanted to keep the photos clustered together. I mean, this is still not the finished design. I end up only using 1 photo, but at this point I wanted to use 2. So here is a progress shot. I'm almost done doing all of the stamping. And here we go, just finishing it up, even though it's cut off at the bottom. That's what I'm doing, is I'm finishing it up. And then I'm going to start adding little bits into the gaps. So this is the haberdashery kit, also from Pick Me Up. It's got plastic buttons, sequins, and epoxy tags. And I love how they add pops of color and dimension. But this layout took me, I worked on it over a period of 2 or 3 days, and it just wasn't feeling right. And I couldn't pinpoint exactly what it was, but it ended up being these buttons and the large sequins. They just stood out. I thought they kind of took away from the stamping, and I wanted this layout to be all about the stamping. So you'll see my solution in a little bit. But at this point, I thought about adding this floral pattern paper piece at the bottom, but it was too heavy. So I decided that I would tear it into little strips and maybe use it as a photo mat. And I actually didn't end up using that either. So you can see this layout was kind of a struggle, but in the end I really love how it turned out. So here I thought about replacing some of the buttons and sequins with puffy stickers, and I liked that a little bit better. But I don't know, I just stood back and I was like, okay, something else needs to happen. And so I added colored stitching along all of the rows, and I think that helps the stamping stand out. And I actually went over some of the lighter letters with a darker color so that they stood out too. At this point I decided to go down to 1 photo so that there was more white space and that it was easier on the eye, and I replaced all of the haberdashery with smaller embellishments, and then I fussy cut a title from the 6x6 paper pad and trimmed that little scalloped border from the 6x6 paper pad and put it next to the photo, and that was it. And I feel like this is a lot cleaner having the smaller embellishments, and I trimmed off all of the thread ends again to make it cleaner, and I love how it turned out. I love how the stamps are featured. They're super colorful, super pretty. So I hope you are inspired to pick up this alphabet stamp from my new Pick Me Up collection. Thank you so much for joining me, and I will see you again soon.